At the same time, on the outskirts of a certain city, in the Hemming Villa, a woman named Lien Su sat with a wine glass in her hand. She wore a red dress and sat elegantly on a chair with her legs crossed. Lien Su's eyes were fixed on the floor as she gently swirled the wine in her glass. She turned her attention to the green-haired man kneeling beside her and asked if it was true that Lien Jibei, her brother, had died in an accident. The green-haired man, lifting his head slightly, explained the tragic events. He revealed that Master Lien Jibei had gone with students from Jidao Martial Arts Academy to participate in the Grand University Martial Arts Tournament. After the tournament ended, Lien Jibei was challenged by Lu Sheng, one of the Seven Saints, and was killed on the spot. The man added that no trace of Jibei was left behind, except for his feet. Lien Su listened in silence, her face betraying no emotion. She held the wine glass in one hand, while the other rested on the table. Using the table for support, she stood up gracefully. She turned her head towards the man, her eyes filled with disbelief. She couldn't fathom how her brother, who was known for his intelligence, could have accepted such a challenge. Her voice was steady but incredulous as she declared that her brother was smart and always intimidated the weak while avoiding the strong. She was certain he wouldn't have accepted another great master's challenge. The man's nervousness grew upon seeing her reaction. Still kneeling, he lifted his head further and revealed that Lu Sheng, the killer of her brother, was merely a level 6 warrior. Lien Su's eyes widened in shock. Her grip on the wine glass tightened unconsciously, causing it to crack slowly. Fury ignited within her, and her body emitted a powerful energy. She turned her gaze back to the man with a murderous look and asked if this was some kind of joke. Upon hearing this, the man with green hair prostrated himself before Lien Su, his forehead almost touching the ground. He begged her to calm down and listen to him until the end. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke, trying to convey the seriousness of the situation. Lien Su, her eyes narrowing with a mixture of frustration and curiosity, had no other choice but to listen to what he had to say. She held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest, as she awaited his explanation. The man revealed that during the battle, Lu Sheng, originally a level 6 warrior, had suddenly risen in power, becoming a grandmaster. This unexpected surge in strength allowed him to completely annihilate Lien Jibei, a level 7 master. Lien Su's eyes widened in shock, her disbelief palpable. She struggled to process the man's words, her mind racing with questions and doubts. Lien Su's composure shattered. She turned her back to the man, her hands trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. As she walked away from him, she flung the wine glass to the side, the glass shattering against the floor. She put a hand on her face, her laughter echoing through the room. The sound was hollow, filled with a bitterness that made the man standing behind her feel uneasy. The green-haired man stood up slowly, his confusion and surprise evident on his face as he watched her erratic behavior. Lien Su stopped walking, her laughter dying down. She placed both hands on her face and began to cry, her shoulders shaking with the force of her sobs. Tears streamed down her cheeks, each drop a testament to her grief and frustration. How could a mere level 6 warrior have killed her brother? She couldn't fathom the reality of it. Within seconds, she regained her composure. The laughter was gone, replaced by a deep, sorrowful weeping. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, trying to reconcile the reality of her brother's death with the unexpected rise of Lu Sheng's power. She wiped her tears away, staring out at the landscape with a determined look in her eyes. She realized that now, with her brother gone, it was time to take action. Lien Su turned back to the man, her eyes blazing with a newfound resolve. "Can you go on a trip?" she asked, her voice steady but filled with a dangerous edge. The man, still kneeling before her, lifted his head, surprise flickering across his face. The air around Lien Su seemed to thrum with energy, a suffocating pressure that made it hard to breathe. Her tears continued to fall, but her expression was one of fierce determination. She ordered the man to kill Lu Sheng. The weight of her command hung in the air, her suffocating energy pressing down on him. The green-haired man prostrated himself again before Lien Su, his expression troubled. He explained that killing Lu Sheng was not appropriate because Lien Jibei's death had occurred during an official combat. According to martial arts rules, tragic outcomes during such fights couldn't be blamed on the opponent. Lien Su's eyes blazed with fury and helplessness at this revelation. She approached the man, her grip tightening around his neck, and stared intensely into his eyes. She demanded to know if her brother had died in vain. At that moment, her phone began to vibrate. Lien Su released her grip on the man and picked up her phone. As she read the message, her entire demeanor shifted. She fell to her knees, overcome with disbelief and sorrow. Laughter erupted from her, but it was a hollow, bitter sound filled with anguish. How could everyone be dead? The weight of the news crashed down on her, and she clutched the phone tightly in both hands. Her body emitted a powerful aura of energy, a manifestation of her overwhelming emotions. Lien Su looked at the man with a mix of despair and determination. She asked him desperately if he would help her. The man remained silent, his face unreadable. Seeing his lack of response, Lien Su made a decision. She rose from the ground with newfound resolve. Her eyes were red from crying, but her expression was resolute. She knew she couldn't rely on anyone else now. If justice was to be served for her brother, she would have to take matters into her own hands. At the same time, in the bustling city, the school bell rang, signaling the end of the day. Children, brimming with joy, began to rush out of the gates, eager to reunite with their waiting parents. Amidst the cheerful clamor, a man wearing a worn cap stood silently by a trash bin, his presence almost invisible against the vibrant backdrop. This man was Fu Jiaming, an old figure who couldn't help but shed silent tears as he observed the scene before him. His eyes fixated on a particular girl with pink hair. Her face lit up with a blissful smile as she played with her friends. The sight of her stirred memories of his late daughter, a poignant mix of sorrow and nostalgia washing over him. The pink-haired girl, sensing Fu Jiaming's gaze, turned to look in his direction. A flicker of recognition crossed her face, quickly replaced by an instinctive response of fear. She whispered urgently to her friends, and they all began to run, their laughter morphing into nervous giggles. They knew him as the crazy old man, a local figure of unease and mystery, someone to be avoided rather than approached. Fu Jiaming watched them flee, a deep sigh escaping his lips as he turned back to his task of rummaging through the trash bin, searching for any recyclable materials he could sell for a few coins. A few moments later, one of the boys playing with the pink-haired girl accidentally bumped into a tall figure. The boy looked up and froze, eyes wide with surprise. Standing before him was Lu Shang, a man with an imposing presence and a calm, gentle smile. Lu Shang's eyes closed slightly as he bent down, his smile broadening, a gesture meant to reassure the startled children. The boy, still confused, took a hesitant step back. Meanwhile, Fu Jiaming continued his search, oblivious to the unfolding scene until a familiar voice called out his name. Fu Jiaming, the voice said, clear and commanding. Fu Jiaming's head jerked up, his heart skipping a beat. It was Lu Shang, and he was approaching with a purpose. Lu Shang's smile remained as he spoke, but there was an edge to his tone that made Fu Jiaming uneasy. "I'm here to ask for the money you owe me," Lu Shang said, his eyes locking onto Fu Jiaming's with an intensity that brooked no argument. The old man's expression shifted rapidly from confusion to shock. With a casual motion, Lu Shang dropped a heavy bag at Fu Jiaming's feet. Lu Shang asked Fu Jiaming to verify if everything was correct. Shocked, Fu Jiaming dropped the bag of bottles and cans onto the ground. He turned towards the bag, filled with disbelief, wondering if Lu Shang had truly accomplished what he had asked for. Without wasting a moment, Fu Jiaming sat down on the ground, preparing himself to open the bag. At that moment, Lu Shang approached him and mentioned rumors about a great master who couldn't be humiliated, even in death. Fu Jiaming, still processing everything, cautiously put his hand on the zipper of the bag and slowly began to open it. As the zipper slid fully open and Fu Jiaming saw the contents inside, he was struck with shock. Inside the bag lay the severed head of Lien Jibei's son, the kidnapper and murderer of Fu Jiaming's daughter. Lu Sheng explained that he had no other choice but to bring the head of this criminal. After stating this, Lu Sheng pulled out a photograph of Fu Jiaming with his deceased wife and their two late daughters. Handing the photograph to Fu Jiaming, Lu Sheng placed his hand in his pocket and smiled gently. He encouraged Fu Jiaming to keep the photo. Fu Jiaming, still seated on the ground, knees bent, paused from looking at the bag's contents. He lifted his head slightly towards Lu Sheng, but when he saw the photograph, he was overcome with emotion. Paralyzed by the sight of his two daughters and his beloved wife in the photograph, Fu Jiaming couldn't hold back tears. He took the photo with both hands, pressing it against his chest. With tears streaming down his face, he lowered his head and clenched his teeth, overcome with grief and relief. With his task completed, Lu Sheng began to walk away. Seeing this, Fu Jiaming prostrated himself before Lu Sheng, tears flowing endlessly. He expressed his heartfelt gratitude. Lu Sheng turned his back to Fu Jiaming, walking away slowly. As he departed, he waved goodbye with one hand and placed the other in his pants pocket, calmly stating that there was no need for thanks. Fu Jiaming remained on the ground, clutching the precious photograph to his chest. The weight of his grief and the closure he had finally achieved settled upon him. Several hours passed, and dusk began to settle over the city, casting long shadows as the lights flickered to life. Lu Sheng ascended to the roof of a tall building, where he watched the sun setting. Pulling out his phone, he dialed Vice Director Zhao and calmly informed him that he had completed his task. Zhao, on the other end of the line, instructed him to return promptly. He had already informed Master Tan Zhongyu, who was eager to officially accept Lu Sheng as his disciple and ensure his safety from any threats posed by the Ji Dao Martial Academy. There was a brief silence on the line as Lu Sheng pondered his response. Finally, he stated firmly that he had no intention of returning. Zhao, taken aback, asked for clarification. Lu Sheng knew Zhao was in his office and asked him to look out of the huge floor-to-ceiling window. Zhao complied, turning to see the towering Saint Tower in the distance. Lu Sheng questioned Zhao if he knew what it took to become a martial saint. He revealed his ambition to become the martial saint himself one day and to dismantle the tall tower so that everyone would acclaim him. With that declaration, Lu Sheng abruptly ended the call, leaving Zhao stunned. Meanwhile, in front of Zhao stood Tan Zhongyu, who had been listening to the conversation. Zhao attempted to explain Lu Sheng's intentions, but Tan Zhongyu interrupted, stating that if Lu Sheng did not wish to be his disciple, then they should forget the matter altogether. Zhao started to rise from his seat, but Tan Zhongyu calmly stroked his beard and gestured for him to stay seated. With a hand behind his back, Tan Zhongyu approached Zhao, advising him not to regret Lu Sheng's decision. He assured Zhao that Lu Sheng had his own path to follow, one that differed from theirs. Despite finding Lu Sheng's aspirations ridiculous and childish, Tan Zhongyu remarked that it was still commendable in its own way. Tan Zhongyu clasped both hands behind his back, gazing at the distant tall tower as he spoke to Zhao. He remarked that it had been a while since he encountered a martial arts disciple as intriguing as Lu Sheng. Zhao, feeling the weight of responsibility, bowed his head respectfully before Tan Zhongyu. Placing a hand over his chest and closing his eyes, Zhao admitted that their interference had led to Lu Sheng's conflict with the Ji Dao family. Zhao explained to Tan Zhongyu that Lan Su, known for her relentless nature, wouldn't cease her pursuit until she eliminated Lu Sheng. Tan Zhongyu turned towards Zhao upon hearing this, acknowledging that Lu Sheng had made his choice and must now face the consequences. With a nod, Tan Zhongyu turned his back, contemplating Zhao's words. Realizing Zhao's point, Tan Zhongyu instructed him to assign Peng Huayu to protect Lu Sheng's family. He emphasized that with Peng Huayu's presence, Lu Sheng's loved ones would remain safe. Zhao accepted Tan Zhongyu's directive silently, bowing his head in agreement as Tan Zhongyu walked away. As Tan Zhongyu departed, he closed his eyes briefly and stated that further discussion with others was unnecessary. Zhao, still with his hand on his chest, watched Tan Zhongyu leave, contemplating the weight of Lu Sheng's words spoken over the phone about destroying the tower. In the quiet office, Zhao reflected on Lu Sheng's determination and his singular ambition to bring down the towering structure. He understood that this was Lu Sheng's way of expressing gratitude and seeking closure. With a sigh, Zhao acknowledged that supporting Lu Sheng in this mission was the least he could do. As the sun began its descent, casting a warm glow over the city, Lu Sheng stood with both hands in his pants pockets, contemplating the monumental decision he had made. His gaze fixed on the towering structure of the tall tower. Thoughts raced through his mind about the consequences of rejecting Tan Zhongyu as his master. Lu Sheng reflected on his past choices. He had once accepted the kindness of Provincial Governor Xia Pingnan without hesitation. However, this decision was different. Rejecting Tan Zhongyu, a martial saint far surpassing Xia Pingnan in stature and skill, required immense courage. Lu Sheng understood the weight of his choice and the challenges it would bring. With his hands still in his pockets, Lu Sheng turned his head towards the tall tower, his eyes narrowing with determination. He contemplated his future under the command of a martial master, knowing he would only ever be second. But Lu Sheng's ambitions soared higher. He aimed not just to follow, but to surpass. He envisioned wielding absolute power, capable of reshaping everything around him. Slowly, Lu Sheng withdrew his hand from his pocket and extended it towards the tall tower, as if reaching for his destiny. His fingers curled in a gesture of determination, symbolizing his resolve to achieve greatness. In his mind, he understood that only by seizing such power could he enact the changes needed to save the world. Several hours passed, and darkness fell over a luxurious mansion nestled somewhere in the city. Inside, someone switched on the lights in a room, casting a warm glow. Lien Su, with her brown hair cascading over her shoulders, approached a large window. Placing her hand on the glass, she gazed silently at the cityscape, lost in her thoughts. As she continued touching the glass, Lien Su turned her head slightly, her expression troubled and sad. Her mind wandered deep into contemplation when suddenly, a man entered the room. This man was from the Ji-Dao martial school, serving under Marshal Saint Mingyu. He leaned against the wall, his gaze downcast, and asked Lien Su if she had dispatched Zhang Kuei. Startled by his voice, Lien Su snapped out of her reverie. She turned her head towards the man but remained silent for a few moments, weighing her response carefully. Placing both hands on the glass, she tilted her head back slightly and looked at the man with a faint smile. Despite her attempt to appear calm, her emotions were evident. Moments later, Lien Su erupted in anger, her demeanor becoming aggressive. She expressed her disdain for Lien Jibei, calling him a useless master, and declared that his death held no significance to her. However, her tone shifted drastically when she spoke of Lien Yi, the last surviving descendant of her family. She emphasized that Lien Yi was her family's final hope. In response, the man maintained a calm voice, reminding Lien Su that Lien Jibei had illegitimate children, a fact she was likely aware of. Undeterred, Lien Su turned towards the man, placing her hand on his chest, and locked eyes with him. She dismissed the existence of Lien Jibei's illegitimate children, asserting that it was inconsequential. Her focus remained on why she couldn't send Zhang Kuei to eliminate anyone threatening the Lien family's existence. Losing her composure, Lien Su approached the man, placing a hand over his neck. Tears streamed down her face as she confessed that Lien Jibei was her biological brother and the other victim, her nephew. Despite their lack of talent, they were her closest family. She portrayed herself as a woman seeking justice and revenge for the debts owed to her family. In a moment tinged with tension, Lien Su confronted the man, emphasizing that neither she nor he had emerged unscathed. They had suffered terrible losses. Her voice broke as tears welled up, showing her vulnerability. The man, maintaining his composure, reassured her that he didn't blame her for the situation. With a calm demeanor, he placed both hands in his pants pockets, lifted his head slightly, and met her gaze sincerely. He acknowledged Zhang Kuei's capabilities, but also pointed out that the young martial artist still lacked something crucial for guaranteed success. He expressed concern that if Zhang Kuei faced interference from someone like Lu Shang, whom Tan Zhongyu had high hopes for, the mission might end in failure. He assured Lien Su that the Bright Jade Hall would likely send reinforcements to protect Lu Shang, complicating Zhang Kuei's task and potentially leading to a fate similar to Lien Jibei and Lien Yi. Lien Su was visibly shocked by this revelation. She spread her hands wide in disbelief, questioning the man about Zhang Kuei's true strength. Moving closer, she placed one hand on his neck and the other on his chest, looking at him with affection. She wondered aloud if she should dispatch someone of higher rank instead. The man responded by placing a reassuring hand on her waist, explaining that he had already dispatched 12 shadows along with Zhang Kuei. He hoped their combined efforts would achieve the desired outcome. As Lien Su processed this information, her cheeks flushed slightly. She approached the man's face, contemplating their closeness. Feeling a surge of emotion, she reached out to touch his face, preparing to kiss him. Initially receptive, the man hesitated and then gently pushed her away, his hand on her shoulder. He explained that while he was committed to helping her, she had overstepped by revealing the Ji-Dao martial school's secret technique to Zhang Kuei without permission. With a sense of finality, the man turned his back on Lien Su, slipping his hand into his pocket as he prepared to leave the room. Lien Su watched him silently, her expression a mix of regret and determination. She understood the consequences of her actions and the rift it had caused between them. As the man continued to move away, Lien Su's frustration boiled over, and she began to scream at him. She demanded to know how else she could persuade an expert from the Ji-Dao martial school. Ignoring her outburst, the man kept walking with determined steps. Feeling dismissed and desperate, Lien Su shouted that he hadn't provided her with any alternatives. Her voice echoed through the hallway, filled with frustration and urgency. Finally, the man halted in his tracks, his expression stern and serious. He turned to face Lien Su, emphasizing that he didn't want a situation like this to occur again. Lien Su, caught off guard by the man's stern response, placed a hand over her chest in surprise. She was taken aback by his assertiveness, realizing perhaps for the first time the gravity of her actions and the consequences they could entail. Moments later, overwhelmed by the weight of the situation, Lien Su collapsed to her knees. She turned her head to the side, staring at the ground as a mixture of emotions washed over her. Suddenly, she began to laugh uncontrollably, the sound echoing through the mansion with an eerie intensity. Her laughter reverberated through the luxurious halls, mingling with the silence of the night outside. It carried traces of bitterness, frustration, and perhaps a hint of madness. The next day, at the third terminal of the bustling airport, a flight touched down. Among the stream of passengers heading towards the exit was a girl with brown hair, wearing glasses and headphones. Her name was Manhwa. With one hand in her pocket and the other gripping her luggage, she walked purposefully towards the exit, her mind racing with thoughts. As she moved, she wondered if her anxiety was justified, considering she had just completed a challenging mission. The events of recent days still felt surreal to her. At just 19 years old, she had managed to kill a master, an achievement that still seemed unbelievable. As these thoughts swirled in her mind, she pulled out her mobile phone and opened a photo of Lu Sheng. Manhwa stared at the photo, reflecting on how impressive he was. She couldn't help but compare him to the young prodigies she had known during her student days. Lu Sheng seemed to surpass them all. She knew that the bright Jade Hall would need another Tiger General, and she thought Lu Sheng could be the perfect candidate for this role. As she walked, she blew a bubble with her gum, her gaze fixed on the screen of her phone. She read a message from Zhao, and what she saw made her pause. She couldn't believe that Lu Sheng had refused to become Tan Zhongyu's disciple. Even more shocking was the news that he had killed the entire Lin family and intended to confront their enemies all on his own. She thought his actions were reckless and decided to call Zhao for clarification. With a calm voice, Zhao answered her call. He explained that Saint Tan Zhongyu was a compassionate man. Although he couldn't accept Lu Sheng as a disciple now, he didn't want to see such a remarkable talent go to waste. Zhao also informed her that her opponent was Zhang Kuei, who ranked 28th in the Jidao martial school and possessed skills in the peak master realm. Hearing this, Manhwa felt a mix of concern and determination. She slightly turned her head to one side, processing the information. Knowing that Zhang Kuei had skills equivalent to her own, she understood the need for caution. She resolved to proceed carefully, aware of the formidable challenge ahead. Several hours later, as darkness settled over the city, the lights flickered on in the Lu Sheng family's house. Inside, the family was bustling around the kitchen, preparing dinner. The warm aroma of home-cooked food filled the air. Suddenly, the front door creaked open, catching everyone's attention. Lu Sheng stepped inside, and the room fell silent for a moment. "Lu Sheng!" his mother exclaimed, relief and a hint of irritation in her voice. Lu Qinghe, his younger sister, quickly approached him. With her hands clasped behind her back and a smile on her face, she looked up at him. "You've got Mom and Dad worried sick, you know?" Holding a backpack in one hand, Lu Sheng couldn't help but smile back at his sister. Her cheerful demeanor was infectious, and he felt a warmth spreading through him just being home again. He looked into her eyes, feeling a connection that only siblings could understand. His mother, however, crossed her arms and fixed him with a stern gaze. "Why are you so late?" she demanded. "You said you'd be home at 1 sharp. Lu Sheng's father stepped in, placing a calming hand on her shoulder. "Relax, dear," he said, closing his eyes and smiling softly. "The important thing is that Lu Sheng is home safe and sound." His mother's tension visibly eased, and she let out a small sigh of relief. All right, she muttered, her eyes softening as she looked at her son. With the immediate crisis averted, Lu Sheng's father turned to him. "Come with me for some drinks, son," he said with a broad grin. "Let's catch up." Lu Sheng, still holding the backpack in one hand, slipped the other hand into his pocket. He turned to his father and nodded, a smile playing on his lips. "I'm coming," he replied. Lu Sheng decided not to waste any more time. He knew he had to act quickly, so he took off his backpack and, with a confident smile, threw it towards Qinghe. "Take care of this for me, okay?" he asked her. Qinghe, caught off guard, quickly grabbed the backpack midair. As she held it, she felt its unexpected weight and couldn't help but look at it curiously. The backpack seemed to hold more than just the usual books and supplies. "Why are you giving this to me?" she asked, her voice laced with genuine surprise. She then added, "I'm just a girl, you know?" Lu Sheng turned to face her, his expression serious yet kind. "It doesn't matter," he said, looking straight into her eyes. "There's something inside for you." Qinghe's eyes widened at the mention of a gift. Her initial surprise shifted to excitement, and she clutched the backpack tighter. "Really?" she asked, her voice filled with a mixture of disbelief and curiosity. Lu Sheng nodded. "Yes, really. Just take it," he reassured her. Without any further hesitation, Qinghe accepted the backpack. As she did, Lu Shang reached out and gently caressed her shoulder, a gesture that was both comforting and encouraging. Qinghe felt a warmth spread through her at his touch, but she quickly turned away, trying to hide her blush. She walked a few steps, then paused and looked back at him over her shoulder. "You know," she began, her tone turning playful and slightly teasing, "I think I finally understand why you can't find a girlfriend." Lu Shang raised an eyebrow, taken aback by her sudden comment. Her words hit Lu Shang like a cold splash of water. He stood there, frozen, as he tried to process what she had just said. While Lu Shang was lost in his thoughts, his mother's voice cut through his reverie. She turned her head slightly towards him, closed her eyes, and with a gentle smile, reminded him, "You've recently turned 19 years old. It's time for you to find a girlfriend and stop wasting time fighting and killing." Lu Shang closed his eyes, feeling a mixture of amusement and exasperation. He put his hand behind his head, trying to play it cool. "Mom, I'm only 19, he replied with a smile. "I think it's still early for that." He wanted to divert the conversation to something less serious, so he asked, "What are we having for dinner tonight?" Before his mother could respond, Lu Shang felt a subtle shift in the atmosphere. He slightly turned his head, sensing someone's presence just beyond the door. His instincts, honed from years of fighting and heightened awareness, kicked in. He quickly turned his body towards the door, then glanced back at his mother. "I'm going out to see a friend," he said, pointing towards the door with a sense of urgency. "Start dinner without me. I'll be back soon." His mother looked at him with a mix of concern and understanding. "Tonight, I'm making stewed chicken wings. They'll be ready in 15 minutes, she informed him, her voice carrying the warmth of home. "Come back quickly, or else the food will get cold." Lu Shang nodded, already moving towards the door. 15 minutes is more than enough, he thought, his determination setting in. Several minutes after leaving his house, Lu Shang strolled through the familiar streets, his hands casually tucked into his pockets. His mind was calm, focused on the surroundings and any potential threats. It didn't take long before he sensed a presence nearby, lurking behind a tree. Without breaking his stride, Lu Shang continued walking, his expression serious yet composed. He acknowledged the man hiding behind the tree with a nod of gratitude. "Thanks for your hard work," he said, his voice steady. The man, who had been watching Lu Shang's family at the station earlier, stepped out from his hiding spot. He bumped his fist against his palm, a gesture of readiness, and met Lu Shang's gaze squarely. "It's just part of the job," he replied calmly, his demeanor cautious yet respectful. As Lu Shang stood still, his hands remaining in his pockets, a palpable energy began to radiate from his body. It was a potent aura, suffocating in its intensity. The man couldn't help but feel a twinge of nervousness. He knew that earlier that morning, Lu Shang had taken down a veteran grandmaster, leaving fresh blood on his hands. In that moment, Lu Shang seemed more than just a man. He exuded the presence of a formidable beast, one that commanded respect and caution. Lu Shang turned his head slightly, a smile playing on his lips as he addressed the man hidden in the bushes. "When you see Commander Yu Fei, express my gratitude to him," he instructed calmly. "Let him know that soon, I'll fulfill my promise." The man nodded silently, his form shimmering as he used his power to fade away. "I will do it without fail," he assured Lu Shang before disappearing completely into the shadows. As the tension of the encounter eased, several seconds passed before Qinghe emerged from the house. She walked towards Lu Shang, raising a hand near her mouth to call out to him. "Lu Shang, what are you doing outside?" she asked, her voice carrying both curiosity and concern. "Come back inside. Dinner's ready." Startled by her sudden appearance, Lu Shang turned fully to face Qinghe. He smiled warmly at her and nodded. "I'll be right there," he replied, his tone reassuring. He knew he couldn't afford to waste any more time, especially with the food waiting to be eaten. Activating his perception ability, Lu Shang focused his senses, allowing a powerful energy to emanate from his body. With both hands back in his pants pockets, he began to scan the entire area around him. The air crackled with his heightened awareness as he searched for any signs of danger or disturbance. Several seconds passed as Lu Shang concentrated, his expression gradually shifting from alertness to relief. There were no strong indications within a radius of 500 meters. His perception assured him that tonight, at least, they were safe from immediate threats. Qinghe stood with her hands on her hips, calling out to Lu Shang once more to hurry up. He acknowledged her with a nod and began walking towards her, the night settling in peacefully around them. Meanwhile, Several days flew by in a blur for Lu Sheng as he spent precious time with his family. The routine of everyday life carried on, seemingly uneventful yet filled with the warmth of familial bonds. In a cafe several miles away from Lu Sheng's home, Peng Huayu sat quietly, her sharp eyes scanning the surroundings vigilantly. She was on alert, watching for any signs of intrusion or threat. With a calm demeanor, she lifted a teacup to her lips as she dialed Zhao, her associate. Bringing the teacup down, Peng Huayu turned her head slightly and inquired about the whereabouts of the leading star, Zhang Kuei. It had been a week since he was expected, and his absence was beginning to concern her. "Where is Zhang Kuei?" she asked, her voice tinged with impatience. She made it clear that if he continued to delay, she wouldn't wait around wasting her time. Zhao's response came promptly through the phone. He explained that according to their plan, Zhang Kuei should have arrived 4 or 5 days ago. His delayed arrival was perplexing, and Zhao speculated that perhaps, despite being an expert in the peak master realm, Zhang Kuei was struggling with procrastination or facing unexpected issues. While Peng Huayu savored her tea, a man seated nearby suddenly stood up and made his way towards the cafe's exit. His movements were purposeful, and Peng Huayu's sharp gaze followed him discreetly. As the man reached the door, he stepped out onto the street and walked towards a waiting taxi. Approaching the back seat window of the taxi, the man leaned in and spoke to someone inside. It was his superior, who was seated comfortably. The window rolled down, and the man quietly informed his superior that Peng Huayu, ranked third in the Jade Martial Hall, was currently inside the cafe. He asked if they should take action. Inside the taxi, the man with green hair sat calmly, a slight smile playing on his lips as he listened to his subordinate's report. The subordinate had suggested taking action upon hearing about Peng Huayu's presence in the cafe, but the green-haired man disagreed. Interlacing his fingers, he rested his elbows on his knees and calmly explained his perspective. He believed that a week ago, it might have been necessary to act, but now the situation had changed. There was no urgency anymore. Upon hearing this, the subordinate accepted the green-haired man's reasoning. He turned towards his superior with a smile, acknowledging his wisdom and mastery. "Congratulations on reaching the martial grandmaster realm," he praised sincerely. The green-haired man, none other than Zhang Kuei himself, nodded appreciatively. With a composed demeanor, he gave the driver a clear instruction: go to Lu Sheng's house. The driver, upon receiving the order, started the taxi and navigated through the streets towards Lu Sheng's residence. Meanwhile, Lu Sheng sat quietly in his room, deep in meditation. The peaceful atmosphere surrounded him as he focused his mind, tapping into his perception ability. Within minutes, the taxi entered Lu Sheng's range of perception. Sensing the approaching energy, Lu Sheng turned his head slightly, a smile spreading across his face. The energy signature he detected belonged unmistakably to a martial grandmaster. This realization filled him with a mixture of happiness and excitement. For Lu Sheng, encountering a martial grandmaster was a rare and significant event. It meant that someone of formidable skill and power was approaching. It ignited his martial spirit,